Hey, it's Jordan with TYT Network, sitting on a lawn chair here in the middle of University of Denver. I'm here with two students and members of the college Republicans here on campus, and we're just sitting, chilling. The school's ridiculously priced, so they paid for these seats. We'll just sit here. I'm here with Eddie and Morris, both juniors and part of college Republicans. So kind of wanted to start with, I know that Denver's more of a liberal city. I know that you're from New Jersey, you're from New Mexico. Talk to me about what got you involved with the college Republicans, if you feel kind of a little bit of a minority as a Republican in such a liberal city, how you feel about those things.
Well, I joined college Republicans because I feel that on many college campuses, University of Denver included, conservative students need a voice on campus, and you see all the time you have Democrat groups, and they definitely take over college campuses through their field work and things of that nature, and college Republicans serves as a really important way of just having a ground operation on college campuses to give conservatives a voice and let students know there's viewpoints out there other than leftists like Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton.
Is your group, which is I think about 10 to 15 active, kind of split among the Republican candidates? You guys have, long debates at night over some whiskey. Tell me about the dynamic.
The dynamic of the group at this point is very unique. I think it reflects the Republican Party as a whole. There isn't just one consensus candidate. Everybody has the opportunity, with so many candidates, to get behind who they wanted to. As far as policy, I think we're all on the same board. With that, we believe in the conservative principles and agendas set forth by previous conservative leaders. And I think that, when we get down to the nitty-gritty, then we start differing. But besides that, our number one objective is to make sure that people can support the candidates they want and, highlight the difference between one candidate and another candidate because they all have something different and unique to offer.
What are you guys thinking in this campaign so far? Have you, fallen in love with Donald Trump like a lot of people? Are you more on the traditional conservative side with a Marco Rubio? Who's your candidate?
Originally, I was supporting Jeb Bush, and at the present time, now that Jeb is out of the race, I'm remaining neutral, and I plan on supporting whoever the Republican nominee is at this point.
So does that mean you're losing sleep over it, or you just don't want to say?
I'm definitely pulling for more of the moderate candidates, so to speak, but in all honesty, I don't have a strong preference at this point, and I'm planning on seeing who the party chooses as their nominee.
And what about you?
Like Eddie, I was also a Bush supporter, but I also think that we still have candidates that are in the race that are qualified and bring different things to the table. So, along the same lines as Eddie, I think we have to play it out now, and we have to kind of sit back and wait and see what the voters across the nation decide today and throughout the rest of the primary session. But I will most likely end up supporting the nominee. Because from our standpoint, we need to have a clear conservative take back the White House in order to make sure that the United States doesn't continue to lose standing globally, and to make sure that we that we can stand up for the things that we believe in instead of the things that may not necessarily be the nicest thing to do.
Let's talk about what you guys believe in. You mentioned Jeb Bush. We actually covered one of his events, and I interviewed him, aka ambushed him. He didn't particularly want to talk to me. But I think if you didn't have Donald Trump in the campaign, there would have been a lot more focus on the quote moderate candidates and their policies. From my point of view, totally full disclosure, definitely more liberal. Jeb Bush was continuing a lot of the policies of his brother, particularly his tax plan, just non-partial analysis of it said it would give mostly wealthy people tax breaks, so kind of continuing that trickle down. A lot of his advisors were the same people that his brother had with Iraq. I respect conservative principles, but do you feel that the top-down, trickle-down economics theory is still something that could help the economy? Because if you kind of look at the chart over the last 30, 40 years, a lot of the concentration of wealth has gone to the top.
I think there's a misplaced narrative that's being distributed by the Democratic Party, and I think there's this false narrative that we need to demonize success and have everybody on a level playing field. And at the end of the day, what's made America great is not the fact that everybody ends up at the same place. It's the idea that everybody has the same level of opportunity. And I think you see this false narrative in the Democratic Party where it's, quote, unfair because everybody doesn't end up at the same place, where at the end of the day, part of the American dream is you work hard to get to that place. You're not entitled to any one thing, that I think demonizing the top 1% or whatever narrative the Democratic Party is pushing is certainly a misguided narrative.
Well, pushing back a little bit, I mean, if you look at it like not everyone's entitled to the same thing, when you look at the policies, I mean, it's not my opinion, it's just fact. The tax cuts are skewed towards wealthier people. They get a bigger chunk. Donald Trump, for example, his tax cut in year one would give like the top 1/10 of 1% over $1 million break. So that's not really an even field. You are redistributing towards the top. I don't think that's a liberal misstatement. People at the bottom 20th percentile would have gotten like $150 in tax cuts versus $1 million. Why is it that wealthy people need that kind of a break?
Well, going to the tax cuts for a second, the United States is a progressive tax system. The problem that lays with the tax system is the complexities that allow folks in the top 1% and the Donald Trumps of the world, that it allows them to manipulate the system because of all the complexities. That I think what a lot of people really like about the conservative candidates is that they understand this, and by simplifying the tax code, you are making the playing field more level, so to speak, simply by having a more simplified tax code and fewer exemptions, as you see.
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of conservative politicians, but you're talking about tax loopholes in the actual tax code. I'm talking about, I think with Trump, he wants to bring down the top percentage to 25%, which would disproportionately help wealthy people. That's not simplifying the tax code. We're talking top marginal rate. Hasn't that been shown under Bush? Like there was not a lot of job growth. There was not a lot of investment. And in fairness, he had 9/11 and those things. But why is it that for the last 30 years, conservative principles said tax cut and deregulation, but it hasn't helped the majority of Americans?
I think that we are focusing on one bracket too much. I think we have to really give a true, honest analysis to the economy as a whole, how we benefit from that. When it comes back to Jeb and his advisors and the people he got, when you're running for president, you look for the previous president's staff. You look for the previous president's campaign advisors and people like that. And the past two Republican presidential presidents were his brother and his dad. So that's not anything that's unnatural. I
don't know about that. I don't know if that's a norm that you just take the last president's staff.
It is. Barack Obama did the same thing with Clinton's staff. He had several members of the Clinton staff, as well as Hillary Clinton herself, part of the team. And that's just what you do. You look at the winning team, you see, Clinton was elected in the 90s, Bush was elected in the early 2000s, and you pull on their staff because they've had experience with it. To answer your question about the tax policy, I think that what we saw prior to the housing market crash in 2008, 2007, is we saw that the Bush-era tax cuts, which have been rolled over under Republicans in Congress as well as Democrats in Congress, are there for a reason, and they keep getting rolled over. I think that we can do a better job at helping the middle class grow, but I also believe that we shouldn't penalize people, for their success.
Right, but what I'm saying is you're not penalizing people; you're giving them extra breaks. So it's not like, for example, Bernie Sanders wants to put a surcharge on people making, I think, over $1 million. I could see your argument that's penalizing people. But when you just look at a president coming in and setting a tax policy, and people in the much bigger class are getting scraps, and people doing very well are getting disproportionate relief, how is that penalizing them? Isn't that giving them kind of, the extra breaks that middle class people who don't put money under their bed? You give middle class people tax breaks, investment, they tend to spend the money right away. So how is that penalizing them by giving them the tax breaks? Whether it's Trump, Rubio, they all have the same tax plan, and it's bigger than George W. Bush's.
Well, I mean, it is from a perspective of, if we looking at a playing field, looking at a level playing field, it is penalizing if we increase a tax code, to a point where it's almost unfortunate, or you almost don't want to be in that 1%. I think at the end of the day, every American can look at themselves, look in the mirror and say, yeah, I could enjoy, having a few extra dollars here or there. But we also have to look at how does that affect the overall economy. And the majority of people, in the 1%, the 0.1%, they don't make income tax. I mean, they don't have a physical paycheck that they get it. They usually get it from capital gains. And at the point that you start taxing capital gains more, then you affect not only the the top percenters of their income and their wealth, but you also start affecting the people who are looking towards retirement. You start looking at people our age who are getting ready to start planning for retirement, hopefully, because we can't rely on Social Security anymore. So then you look at it and you say, well, if I have these extra, an extra $100, extra $1,000 here, I could invest it, or because the government has put more taxes on capital gains to try to level the playing field and try to, balance the wealth more, is it really worth me paying taxes on that, or am I just going to sit on it?
Let me restate. If he makes, let's say, $45,000 a year, and I make $750,000 a year, who would getting a bigger tax cut? Which one of us would be able to help the economy the most? Somebody making $45,000 a year, pretty much paycheck to paycheck, let's say lives in Manhattan where he was born, or me, $750,000 a year, certainly don't have 20 yachts, but I'm pretty comfortable, I'm doing well. Who would that help?
Well, I think that would help, it's all proportional.
Can't say both.
No, it's proportional, right? The amount of tax cuts that you would get proportionally, because it's a percentage, is what he would get making 45.
Yeah, that's not true. For example, I just told you Trump's plan gives over $1 million in tax breaks to people making, I'm talking like the plutocrats, the oil guys, the bank guys, whereas people in the bottom 20th percent are getting a couple $100, which adjusted for inflation, I'll tell you, New York City, if I got $150, I might be able to get some coconut milk. Yeah. So I'm not, I respect your conservative principles. It's just based on the data hasn't played out that way, because the conservative candidates are talking about helping the middle class, but the middle class makes up the majority of the consumer spending. So if you're continuing this trend of giving wealthy people, and I think that might be why Trump has latched on a little bit, because he has said some things that have come off liberal, like, I'm going to tax the hedge fund guys, and, my people don't need a tax cut. Do I believe he's going to follow through on that? No. But could we maybe find a middle ground where, wealthy people maybe not punish them, but don't give them extra benefits that don't help the middle class?
I think that, that is definitely a conversation that we should have. As you said, the last 30, 40 years, we're at the point where we're at now. And I think in order to be a successful conservative candidate, a successful liberal candidate, you have to reassess and see, do we want to continue the policies of the past? Yes, there are candidates now who have grown up and done politics in that 30 to 40 year time span. So that's what they know, and that's what they are towing the line for. But I think, again, we have to look at how are we going to improve it. I don't think we should punish the 1%, but I also don't think, that there isn't any room for adjustment.
Let's talk about Donald Trump, because take away Republican, Democrat, but are you concerned that he is stoking people's worst instincts and really demagoguing a little bit, obviously putting a bad light on the Republican Party? To Paul Ryan's credit, he came out the day after the temporary Muslim ban and said this is not what we stand for. But how do you feel about Trump and the just gigantic appeal he's developed in the Republican Party?
I think, first of all, it's important to realize that Donald Trump is not a conservative. If you look back at his record, it's pretty obvious he doesn't believe anything that he says. Even yesterday, there's a story that he was telling the New York Times editorial board that he doesn't genuinely believe his immigration policy, that I think what he's doing is...
I just want to clarify. There's an off-the-record conversation they had where it seemed that Trump suggested I would be flexible, it's not hard and fast on the wall, and, that's just my starting point. But I think his supporters wouldn't be happy to hear that he's flexible on the number one thing he said he's going to do.
Well, that's exactly right. And it's also a matter of Donald Trump's a master of the media. There's no doubt about that. Nobody would question that, whether left, right, center, or whatever falls in between. Donald Trump just is a master of manipulating the media and just stoking people's worst instincts through the media and the Republican Party. And it's critical that the other candidates, to counter Donald Trump's message, focus on the more positive elements of this conservative movement and really what makes the conservative movement what it is. And Donald Trump is activating a group of people that are just not conservatives, that don't reflect the conservative movement, and that haven't voted in a presidential election for many of them ever, and they're just getting stoked by Trump stating things that they just don't want to admit publicly, that are beliefs that they genuinely harbor, and as a result, Trump's just not a conservative.
You mentioned the media. I think I worked at Fox News back in the day. I also worked at MSNBC. So I think the media, a lot of times among conservatives, it's like the evil liberal media, this and that. I don't particularly agree with that, but that's for another day. What I've seen from the media is almost, I don't want to name drop, but Susan Sarandon mentioned it to us, that Trump has almost normalized racism. And I see a lot of the media actually, complimenting that. You see a Jake Tapper, who I happen to like, interviewing him. He asked him about his statements about the KKK. Trump deflects, he pushes back, very tepidly, and then he moves on to the next question. Yes, the media, a lot of people think, should stay neutral, but if someone's being a racial demagogue, should you even give that person a platform?
I think that what we're seeing is that the media is taking on a different role this election cycle than it has in the past. They're being particularly hard on some candidates, but again, not Donald Trump.
What about Bernie Sanders? I know he's not your cup of tea, but do you think they've covered him? I mean, he's had just as big turnout as Donald Trump, barely gets any coverage.
I think the same thing also with Bernie Sanders, that they're not covering these kind of polarizing people for whatever reason. I don't know what skin they have in the game, but it almost seems like they're trying to direct things in a manner that they're trying to influence the election beyond just voting. And, on both sides, it's unfortunate. I mean, there are plenty of Bernie Sanders folks who are irritated by the way that the media kind of shrugs him off, kind of disregards him. When you have auditoriums and arenas being filled with thousands of people listening to him. I mean, the same thing with Trump. They will cover him just because I think what Eddie said, he is a pretty good master of the media. But at the same time, they're not willing to actually confront him on the topics and give him any kind of substantial pushback.
Are you guys? Do you guys feel that the Republican Party as a whole is moving from a smaller government, low tax kind of thing to essentially a white nationalist party?
No.
Under Donald Trump?
No, that's definitely not where the Republican Party is moving towards.
Well, he is up. CNN poll, he's at 49%. So nationally.
Well, I'd say if you look at Massachusetts, for instance, you have roughly 7,500 people that left the Democratic Party and about, I think, 3,700 that joined the Republican Party just so they could support Donald Trump. That I don't think it's fair to say 49% or whatever percentage it may be of the Republican Party is racist. And I don't think it's reflective of the Republican Party at all, because these are people that have never voted in a Republican election. There's no one else in the Republican Party that motivates them, that they're not motivated by Donald Trump's conservative beliefs. If you speak to Donald Trump supporters, conservatism is not what Donald Trump is preaching. Conservatism is not this idea that you build a wall and keep out all immigrants. Conservatism is understanding that encouraging legal immigration is what's made America what it is. And conservatism is just not Donald Trump's beliefs. And I genuinely believe that when Donald Trump is defeated, his supporters will no longer stay in the Republican Party because they will realize that they have no place in the Republican Party.
I got to get you guys out of here. So if Trump, I know you said support the nominee, but you've come out with some strong sauce against Trump. If Trump's facing Hillary Clinton, would you vote for Trump?
I plan on seeing what the options are. I plan on seeing if there's a third party option. I plan on seeing who Donald Trump surrounds himself with amongst the Republican Party. So I don't feel
if it's Trump, Hillary Clinton, Rand Paul, third party.
In that hypothetical, I would say Rand Paul, but I think it's important to just take all factors into account, and I don't think it's responsible to speculate on where the election will be come October.
You have a future in politics. You have a good way of answering. Same for you.
Along the same lines, I think we have to see how it plays out the rest of the spring and heading into the summer. If we're faced with a Trump-Clinton, I would rather be an educated voter and vote what I believe is going to be best for this country instead of one party or another if it came down to that.
Does economic policy or preventing a racial demagogue, what's more important?
Put me on the spot there.
My job.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we have to look at it and we have to realize that people are more than just a number. And so along those lines, we would probably have to avoid anything that would try to put any more divisions between the racial differences that we have in America now.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.